Okay, this is going to be the first video in a series of videos dedicated to game design. Who am I making this for? Well, I'm a designer, game designer, so I'm making this for other game designers partly, but also partly for players. Designers, I guess, for the obvious reason. I just think that there's not a lot of discussion around game design, what makes good games. There's lots of that for movies, books, all that kind of stuff. But for games, I just don't think that the art is kind of taken as seriously. For players, I think it informs a lot of purchasing decisions, so it's good to know kind of what goes into good game design. But a big part of game design nowadays is community feedback, and so I think with players being on forums, asking for different things out of their games and from developers, it's important to know what questions to ask. So for this video, I want to focus on character progression specifically. So what is character progression? Well, I'm not talking, advancing the story in any kind of way. I'm not talking, getting to the next level in Mario or something like that. I'm also not talking about getting better at a game, right? Playing chess, becoming a grandmaster, something like that. Character progression, I mean specifically to be your in-game character somehow improving. One of the most common forms of that is going to be like leveling up, right? You get experience points. I can get experience points, you kill monsters, go on quests, all that kind of stuff, and well, then your player or your character rather is going to progress in some kind of substantial way. Of course, there's other ways of doing this. Zelda or Metroid have ways of progressing those characters. It's not a level up system, but you're getting energy tanks, heart containers, new items, things like that. So I think it's easy to talk about what it is, but why is it fun? Well, first of all, it goes kind of hand in hand with challenge and achievement. Now, not every game is trying to be challenging or to give you something to achieve and work towards, but a lot of games are. In fact, I say most games are. And so having some sort of progression system, it's gonna enable you to overcome more difficult challenges to go and achieve something, but in itself it's also kind of an achievement, right? You get to the next level, it feels good, it gives you that kind of satisfaction of leveling up or whatever. It's also fun because it tends to open up more content, so you could continue the story, maybe you get to try out new abilities or something like that. New areas are open that were previously too difficult to go to. There's all kinds of stuff to look forward to as your character gets better. And then there's kind of this look forward element. So whether it is an area that's too difficult to go to now, the monsters there are too strong or something like that, or it's just like a skill tree, and looking ahead in your skill tree, you're like, I can't wait to get to this one skill, it sounds fun, it sounds cool. So having that kind of in front of you in this forward looking sense is a lot of fun for people. I think though, talking about examples of character progression, both good and bad, is a really good way to go about kind of figuring out how we can improve character progression as a whole. So I want to start with some bad examples. Diablo 3 is the first one that comes to mind for me, and it's kind of split into two parts, this game. Whether you played it or not, I'm sure you can follow along. So there's kind of the starting game from level 1 all the way up to level 70, which is your max level. That's kind of one form of progression, and then they have this end game system afterwards. And so just starting with the 1 to 70, why do I think it's an example of bad character progression? Well, for one, it's too fast. So I'm talking about Diablo 3 in its current iteration. I know it's been through lots of patches and whatnot, but getting from 1 to 70 it can happen really, really quick. And there's all kinds of things to improve your character. You're leveling up, you're getting new items, all through that time. But they have these systems in place that are like, if I get an item at level 10 as opposed to an item at level 9, well, that item will be a level 10 item, and it'll be substantially stronger than my level 9 item. But because I level up so fast, it's like I go from 9 to 10 to 11 to 12. I might have, a level 9 sword, and now I pick up a level 12 sword, and that level 12 sword is just so much better than the level 9 one. It's not even really satisfying to get the new one now, because, well, I know I'm just going to throw it away for a level 15 sword in like 15 minutes of gameplay. And this especially becomes a problem because they have this rarity system where, I got a legendary item, I got a rare item, isn't this so cool? But the item level completely outvalues the rarity. And so it gets rid of any of that kind of fun progression sense, right? You want these substantial gains at every level that make you feel good. When you get a new item, you should be excited about it because you get to use it for a while. So this is in contrast to Diablo 2, which I think is an incredible example of character progression. The items that you get make substantial improvements a lot of the time. If it's a more rare item, substantial improvements to your character. You can use some of those unique items for 10, 15 levels sometimes, and sometimes more. Some of the really early game items are very good, and so it's satisfying to get those. Every level up as well, it happens a lot slower than in something like Diablo 3, and you get something substantial. You get a skill point. That skill point could unlock a new ability if you're at the right level, or it could just improve your existing abilities by a significant amount, and that feels very satisfying. So you have that kind of look forward sense of, what am I going to unlock, what am I going to get? You're making your character better. I think it is just a really great example of kind of how to structure things. So then there's the other side of Diablo 3, which I actually think does it good for a little bit. So that's the end game content. Now the end game content gets rid of the item level problem because you're at max level already. So great, now it just has to give you some kind of satisfying progression as you're playing at max level. So you can get these Paragon levels. It's kind of just a nice little bump. It doesn't really help your character all that much, but it feels good to just progress in these tiny little ways. Okay, so that's fine. But now the items that you're finding, it's really important that you get these legendary items, these rare items, because you're getting them at the max level possible. So every time you're replacing, a rare item, a magic item, with a legendary item, there's this significant boost in power, and it feels really good. Then you start opening up set items. Once you complete a set or a part of a set, that's a substantial jump. It feels really good. You're getting it really fast. But it does hit a wall very, very fast. It doesn't take that many hours of gameplay to get an entirely legendary arsenal of items. You can get lots of your sets really quick, and then the progression slows down significantly. So there's this small window where I think they do it very, very good. But the rest on either side I don't think is that good. And this kind of nails down one of the biggest problems I see with character progression. So I love to use that example, but there's some other ones that I think are both good and bad. So Dungeons and Dragons I'm going to pick on. There's something that they do that I can't stand, which is at early levels the jump is too great, and then at later levels the jump is too small. It's not a smooth transition of progression. So if you're not familiar, let's say, in most systems, it's always different in all these different systems. You start as a fighter with 12 HP at level 1. Well, if you get to level 2 and you just take the average hit points, you're going to get another 8 hit points and jump up to 20. And that's a huge jump, right? 66%. That's enormous. And in Dungeons and Dragons, 8 health is a lot. So it feels substantial, it feels good, but you get there fast. It's a big jump. It somewhat, in my opinion at least, ruins the immersion of the world, that someone can be so much stronger just from one level up than someone who's, right, a level 2 versus a level 1. But that jump doesn't stick. You're going to get 8 HP at jumping from 2 to 3 and from 3 to 4. And that goes all the way 18, 19, 20, now 8 HP. I mean, that's almost nothing. At that point, you only start to care about the abilities that you get, the skills that you unlock, which again, at early levels, are very substantial. They're huge. And as you get later, there are some very, very big ones, but you have these sort of dead spots. I might go from level 8 to level 9 or 9 to 10. The HP increase doesn't seem that good. If the skill that I get isn't that impressive, or maybe I don't even get anything from my class, it's just not satisfying. You need a kind of steady increase as well as these big jumps. And kind of keeping that uniform is good. So Divinity Original Sin 2, I remember seeing an interview with developers, and they talked about, well, what are we targeting for each level up? And they said about a 20% power increase. And that one really stuck with me because it quantifies it with a number. And looking at the game and looking at other systems, it actually is a pretty good number to go by. In the game, you feel like when you level up, an encounter that was maybe previously very difficult or similar to a difficult encounter that you've had is now substantially easier. You feel stronger, but you also don't feel like outmatched if you're underleveled, or you don't feel completely overpowered if you're one level too high. It's the right amount where you can kind of, as a player, be like, well, I'm more comfortable if I level up more. I don't want to go to these higher level areas, but still giving you the flexibility to go to these more challenging areas that are maybe like one level higher, and you can kind of poke up there. And then you get rewarded for it with some stuff that's going to be about 20%, 40% stronger, something like that. So it's a much smoother curve than something like than Dungeons & Dragons. Now, another bad example I want to go to happens in some of the Elder Scrolls games, but I think Oblivion is the worst offender of that, and that is scaling difficulty. When it's as flat as they do it in that game, it completely breaks character progression. So if you're not familiar, basically what happens as you level up, the world levels up around you. Now, it's an open world game. I understand why they do it. You can go anywhere at any time. So if they're throwing, too difficult of stuff in certain areas, it ruins the open world sense. Now you just can't go there because it's way too difficult. So they say, no, it's going to level up with you. You go into a cave, it's based on the level that you are. You're out in the wilderness, it's based on the level that you are. The problem with that is, as I get better, everyone else gets about equally better. And so if it takes me 5 hits to kill a bandit at level 1, well, even when I get better swords and armor and level ups, it takes me 5 hits to kill a bandit at level 10. It doesn't improve the challenge or the achievement or anything like that. It's just kind of like a fake way of progressing. You can feel good. You do unlock, new ways of doing things, new skills. So it does kind of open up some differences. Your equipment looks cooler, in all fairness, but the difficulty really doesn't follow with it. And so the progression just kind of falls flat because there's not much purpose to it. Now, on the other hand, you can take a game like Dark Souls, which I understand may be, too difficult for some. It's not that fun. But they just say, hey, here's the world. Here's where all the tough stuff is. Here's where kind of tough stuff is. You go progress. And this does get into the you have to become a better gamer sort of thing. But as your character progresses, areas become easier. You can go explore them in a sort of open sense. It's not really an open world game, but you can choose the direction that you're heading at any time. And it does a really, really good job of just kind of letting you go anywhere, find what's difficult, progress your character, and then come back later at some other point. And so it feels a lot more satisfying. You get that achievement, you get that challenge, you beat that hard boss or that hard enemy. And it really does. It feels good to have progressed to do that. I think Baldur's Gate also does a really good job of doing that. The first one, you can explore sort of wherever you want, out in the wilderness. You can find all kinds of hard things, whatever. Really good example. Another one that I'd harp on is just in general a lot of JRPGs. So I talked about that 20% leveling difference. Well, JRPGs often have a system where you can level up a ton, but each level is a very, very small upgrade. So I might go from level 1 to 200 by the end of it, but each individual level up doesn't really feel good. It feels okay. It's a nice sort of like, all right, I'm a little bit better, but it's just not enough to feel substantial. And so I think as well, something like Path of Exile, similar sort of thing. You get lots of little upgrades, items, right? They're just a little bit better, that kind of thing. But then they have these substantial jumps. You're getting these big nodes on your level up tree, and these completely change how your character plays. And so when you intermix the two a little bit, it's a lot more satisfying than if you just say it's a flat, sort of flat, very small improvements from 1 to 200 or something like that. Another really good example, I mentioned, Zelda or those Metroid games is an alternate form of progression. It's not levels, but they do a very good job of the look forward mechanic. So sure, it's easy in an RPG to just say, well, here's your skill tree, and this is the skill you're going to get at the next level. How cool is that? But they do these really cool things in the Zelda and the Metroid games where you can see an item or you can see an area that you just can't get to, and you want to get there. It sticks in your head because you'll try to solve this puzzle, and you just can't. And then when you get the item or you progress far enough in the game such that it's available, you go back to those moments and you're excited to go back and get that thing, which makes it a really, really satisfying form of progression. So with all that, those are kind of examples of games you might be familiar with. I want to go into how I applied this to my game that I worked on called Artifacts. I'll link like a free version in the description or something like that if you actually want to see the details of the rules and how it's all done. But I really took to that kind of 20% upgrade rule per level. Now, it doesn't have a typical progression system in that you get experience and level up. Instead, you're getting these shards, which are a little similar, I guess, to if you think of Dark Souls, you have souls, which is this universal currency. Shards would be like a currency that you could spend on items or something like that. Or it's going to be something that you're going to use to upgrade your equipment. So you could upgrade your weapons, your armor, whatever it is. And it's going to be about a 15 to 20% jump per item upgrade. And you can go from 1 to 10. From the 1 to 10, it's 9 steps across, usually about 4 pieces of gear. It's like 36 small upgrades from the start of the game to the end. And then along with that, I wanted to take those big improvements. In Diablo 2, you're unlocking a new skill tree level, right? 6, 12, 18, that kind of thing. Path of Exile, you're hitting those big nodes, those big jumps. So I added these 2 other systems, enhancements and alterations, which are going to be a bigger jump than that. It's going to change, 1, how you play the character, and 2, if you're trying to quantify it in terms of power level upgrades, you're talking somewhere in the realm of like 30 to 40%, something like that. Hi, cat. And so if you want to take a look at those actual systems, I'll link it or something below, so you can take a look. But that's kind of a decent way to see how you're going to take all these ideas and actually translate it to a character progression system. So you might be asking, well, why do games get it wrong then? If this is how easy it is, I mean, this isn't that complicated. Why do games constantly get it wrong? Well, for one, I think a lot of developers don't understand meaningful progression versus just numbers going up. I can think of games like, Anthem, Cyberpunk, which recently came out. They just feel like they have these RPG systems, these level up systems that are tacked on. It's not substantial numbers that are going up. It doesn't flow, it doesn't mesh together. I just don't think that they understand what really makes it fun, which makes sense because at a surface level it does kind of just look like numbers going up. But I think that there just needs to be more investment, more learning from developers to understand why these things are fun. So that's on them, all right, but what about on the average player, the average consumer? Well, I think they ask for a lot of the wrong things as well. So, for example, like we often have games that are in, the playtest realm or a beta or something like that, and on Reddit, people are posting, hey, I hope it gets this, I hope it gets that. I think a lot of times they're asking for the wrong features or they're asking the wrong questions. So, as an example, I see stuff that's like, I hope that they add multiple skill trees, or I hope that they have an end game. And I think that those are the wrong kinds of things to ask for, because it's actually irrelevant in terms of progression. You need a good, satisfying progression system, whether it's an end game, whether it's from multiple skill trees, all that kind of stuff. That's like implementation details. What you really want to ask for, if you're hoping that they have a satisfying level up or RPG system or some sort of progression, you want to be saying things like, well, I hope item upgrades are substantial, and I hope that they're character defining. I want every level up to feel like a sizable increase in power. Things like that. And really get into, those are very broad, but really get into the systems that they're posing, the systems that they're trying out in these betas, and challenge those. Try to make sure that they're answering those questions. Hey, how much do I actually go up in power every time I level up? Is this going to feel good? And equate that to, the time that you're going to spend. Because if it's happening all the time way too quick, 20% power every 5 minutes, well, that's not satisfying. And it's also not satisfying in the other sense if it's, 1% every 5 minutes or spread out over a long amount of time. Like, look for those. Okay, if I'm going to play a game from level 1 to 20, it's probably going to take anywhere from 20 to 50 hours, something like that, depending on the type of game. Bump me up, 15, 20% every hour along that, something like that. So, okay, let's just get into a real brief summary of all this stuff. So, what is good? Significant progression. Feels good. 20%, 15%, somewhere around there for stages of progression. Feels really good. And that could be on an item, or that could be on a character as a whole. Small progression feels good. Little tiny bumps along those significant things feel good. Even just splitting the experience bar into like 10 separate segments feels good, because you hit each thing and it's just a little satisfying achievement within there. But you don't want something where it's way too significant. You got to filter your drops in Path of Exile. Well, that's too many drops. We don't need that many improvements. We just need a few along the way, and then a few significant ones. Forward-looking is fun, right? Show stuff on a skill tree that's fun. Show areas that you can't go to. Have difficult encounters that you can't pass. Make people excited about progressing their character. And then finally, progression should really aid in accomplishing something, right? If there's difficult areas that you can't pass, that's great. If you're trying to get to new parts of the story, that's awesome. Getting new abilities, all that's awesome. You don't want that sort of flat progression where the world is progressing along with you. You really want to feel like there's a purpose to the reason why you're progressing. So hopefully that kind of covers a general overview of character progression. I'll be doing more of these different subjects. We'll get into some different stuff. But I think that's it for this one. Thanks.